Really wanted to talk about the comments that Dr. Fauci made in front of Congress and take a look at the paper that he was referring to, whether or not it was gain of function research or not. Some of the comments that the senator said, I feel like don't really make any sense. It seems like Dr. Fauci, I have no hate for him, but I really do feel like he somewhat misled the charge. I know he's under an immense amount of pressure, but on the whole, I feel like he did change his opinion quite a lot, and we'll get to a clip that's rather embarrassing of him later on in the video. He just changed his mind about whether or not you should wear a mask so many different times. The guidance changed so many times, and you can totally understand that the public was very confused and didn't know what the proper guidance or procedure was. It changed several times throughout the course of the year. I just remember when this all started last year that it was pretty obvious this thing was being spread through what's called droplet or aerosolized particles. That's the only way something can transmit so easily, right? If you look at most other infections, whether it's a worm or HIV or tuberculosis, of course we wear masks because mouth-to-mouth transmission is essentially the easiest way, or respiratory transmission is essentially the easiest way. So never in the history of this, once we saw how fast it was spreading, it just never made sense that there would ever be guidance to not wear a mask. And I know that's what happened many times. You should always be wearing, honestly, even if you have been vaccinated, you should always be wearing, I still wear my mask everywhere that I go. I talked about in one of my previous videos, I developed pericarditis. At least that's the diagnosis. I honestly don't even know if that's correct anymore. But I had a severe reaction to the first vaccine shot. And of course, I've had every other single vaccine ever created. In all of this and all of everything COVID, that is one of the huge problems, is to get accurate data that is actually representative of everyone is near impossible, because your data is always going to be a sample. Like in the vaccine trials, it was 44,000. And obviously these people weren't monitored. We didn't have the time to monitor them over years, which is usually the case, which you want, the best, obviously the more time you can monitor somebody for side effects, the better, but we didn't have time to do that. I feel like the guidance should have never changed. It should have never been a point of contention or politicized. That's the other embarrassing thing, how this was ever politicized. It was quite obvious from the beginning that the way it was transmitted was through aerosolized droplets, and it was airborne. That's the only way it could have been transmitted. Look at HIV. The majority of cases we know are in male-to-male contact through the rectum. It does get spread other ways, of course, but you can really pretty much tell, if you've studied anything in health science or disease transmission, you could tell very early on that this was being transmitted through the mouth. Because it's how often do you have blood contact? There's of course a lot of bloodborne diseases. This is a bloodborne disease, right? The bloodborne virus. But the thing is you can't, how often are you having blood contact with other people? Obviously not much. People are getting HIV infections from using needles. Obviously it's not spread through needle injection, because how many cases are, it potentially could be, but that's not the main source of transmission. Because of course, for it to spread so quickly, it's not as if people are passing around needles on airplanes or in Wuhan, China, it's not as if everyone's just passing around needles everywhere for it to spread like this. So the fact that mask guidance ever changed, or that Dr. Fauci would have ever said, like, don't wear a mask, is just mind-blowing in my opinion. The whole thing with being outside is air particles disperse much more freely outside, and when you're inside, it's more likely that you're going to inhale droplets or virus particles that are aerosolized from someone else. So anyway, let's take a look at some of the comments that were made. I'm just going to pick apart some of the stuff that was said because I really disagree and don't understand it. And then we'll take a look at the paper and...
That statement, this paper that you were referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly.
It pretty much clearly looks to me as if there are, well, the first thing is that it is funded by or was funded, at least in part, by the United States. You can see down here, there's a grant support by the United States /NIH. If you read the abstract and look at the figures, they are clearly looking at small parts of the viruses. Of course, it's very complicated science. You're looking at amino acid chains, which are proteins. You'll also see, so they're referred to in these different, they're looking at the genetics, which are all labeled in acronyms. And, they're essentially, so it's, of course, this is based in China. And the research was conducted in China and in Chinese bats. And you can see that they're clearly looking at SARS-CoV, which is the coronavirus. Acute respiratory, SARS stands for sudden acute respiratory syndrome, and COIVD is the coronavirus. So they're currently looking at the virus and the proteins and genes, and comparing them with what they're finding. They're comparing viruses and looking at proteins and how they change, and receptors. Receptors are another type of protein found in bacteria, cells, and viruses. And so, without getting into all of the nitty gritty, they're looking at, here you have in Figure 9 functional characterization, infection of certain types of cells, alignments of nucleotides. So nucleotide is, of course, the inside center of cells. So this is again like gene sequencing. They're looking at commonalities in the viruses and in what they're in the microscopic viruses, and mapping them out. So they're looking at, the last sentence tells you a lot. They're looking at the origins and the evolution of this virus, the coronavirus, and they're essentially warning that this was in 2017. So they're essentially warning that. So 4 years ago, we were already looking and being talking about the possibility of different coronaviruses coming out, and they were clearly looking at how the virus attaches to or binds with the ACE2 receptor. So that's, of course, essentially looking at how does the virus affect human tissues and proteins. So honestly, to me, it seems like we're can you totally blame Dr. Fauci for this? How involved was he in ensuring that? Of course, you can see the NIH here at the top. How involved would he be in something like this, where, of course, you see all the authors are Chinese, English, because of course these are English letters, but that's not Chinese. But you can clearly tell these are not from the United States. Dr. Fauci's name is not going to be on this paper. He wasn't directly involved in the research, but he was in charge of the NIH, or a consultant at least. But we're really mincing words here. I mean, whether or not you could call this gain of function research is a matter of essential opinion. It's going to be a pretty easy definition here. So, it's not the words, of course, here are pretty straightforward. So, in the context of virology, which of course we're talking about viruses here, gain of function refers to an organism's ability to gain or lose functions as they pertain to other organisms. Of course, viruses cannot survive without hosts, and so gaining or losing functions would be the study, looking at how the virus will mutate and change in order to, of course, we're concerned about human infection. So this article to me looks like, it's really, they're really just mincing words here.
That were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature. It is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
No
one is alleging that those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain of function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
not. You can't get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
It does meet his very definition, Dr.
Given that no scientific studies have shown significant numbers of reinfections of patients previously infected or previously vaccinated, what specific studies do you cite to argue that the public should be wearing masks well into 2022?
I'm not sure I understand the connection of what you're saying about masks and reinfection. We're talking about people who have never been infected before.
You're telling everybody to wear a mask, whether they've had an infection or a vaccine. What I'm saying is they have immunity, and everybody agrees they have immunity. What studies do you have that people that have had the vaccine or have had the infection are spreading the infection? If we're not spreading the infection, isn't it just theater?
No, it's
not.
not.
The vaccine and you're wearing 2 masks. Isn't that theater?
No, that's not. Here we go again with the theater. Let's get down to the facts. Okay, the studies that you quote from Crotty and Sete look at in vitro examination of memory immunity, which in their paper they specifically say this does not necessarily pertain to the actual protection. It's in vitro.
And what study can you point to that shows significant reinfection? There are no studies that show
just
significant
let me finish the response to your question, if you please. The other thing is that when you talk about reinfection and you don't keep in the concept of variants, that's an entirely different ballgame. That's a good reason for a mask. In the South African study conducted by J&J, they found that people who were infected with wild type and were exposed to the variant in South Africa, the 351, it was as if they had never been infected before. They had no protection.
So in May 31st, the World Health Organization named the Delta variant. And as you can see, there's like 5,000 confirmed cases in the United States so far, but The senator, so the problem with this is the senator is essentially saying that we should have these trials showing, that after you're vaccinated that you're protected against this Delta variant. And it's way too fast to know. If we've just labeled this, even if it was discovered earlier than May, it's not possible to have enough clinical data to say whether or not you're fully protected, and you shouldn't be worried about getting reinfected with any one of the variants after you've had the initial vaccinations that were developed by Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. We just have no idea whether or not you could possibly have immunity to them. We're so early in this fight that it's essentially what the senator is asking is essentially impossible.
Having 117 that's becoming more
You're
dominant.
policy based on conjecture.
No,
Have the
it isn't
conjecture
based
that we're
on
going to get
conjecture.
variants, so you want people to wear a mask for another couple of years.
No.
You've been vaccinated and you parade around in 2 masks for show.
No.
You can't get it again. There's virtually 0% chance you're going to get it.
Again, here, this is where the senator is just absolutely bonkers. But in order for someone to say that you cannot get reinfected, you'd have to have mountains of clinical data. And if we're just now recognizing, these variants and like the dominant variant in the United States is X, you're not going to have clinical data to say whether or not you're protected, or if you're safe based on the previous vaccinations. It's all new. There's no data that exists on this.
Well, let me just state for the record that masks are not theater. Masks are protective. And we
You have
ask
immunity there, theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any sign.
I totally disagree with you.
Dr. Fauci.
But we are living right now in a situation where we're having a dominance of 117, which was the original UK. We have a very troublesome variant in New York City, a 526. We've got 2 variants in California, a 427, 429, and we have a number of others. So we're not dealing with a static situation of the same virus. That was the only point I'm making.
This is where I think Dr. Fauci does look good. He's recognizing that there are a lot of different variations, and that it's impossible to know whether or not the vaccines that were created originally for the first virus are going to provide any sort of immunity. And to be certain on this, you would have to have, again, several clinical trials, which I'm going to look for them, but I'm pretty sure they haven't been done yet.
Lab in Wuhan.
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute.
Gain of function.
That is
you would
not-
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So
they
do
write
you still
about it.
support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
We do not send money now to the Wuhan
Do you
Virology
support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a
The NIH and NIAID categorically has not funded gain-of-function research to be conducted in the Wuhan.
So this is readily available on the NIH's website. You can clearly see that I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this guy's name or who this is, but you can see that China is involved in this, and this is an NIH spending basically archive, you can see the total funding was about 600,000. It was by the NIH, and all of the publications are listed here, and it's all, whether or not this fits into the category of gain of function is, I guess, disputable. And what the senator and Dr. Fauci are battling, why they're battling with each other. So it looks like this is surveillance data. So there's some surveillance data. There's, again, like a genomic or genetic coding investigation into the origin and evolution of rodent-borne pathogens like bats. But this is all going in China. There's genetic structure of SARS-CoV-2. Does not rule out lab origin. Chimeric structure and furin cleavage site. So, of course, this is just a technical term for something on the virus or inside cells. And they're saying that this might be the result of genetic manipulation. And look at the publication dates. So these are all, not everything probably happened in 2021, but that was the date that it was published. And then, of course, throughout 2020, bat-borne virus diversity spillover and emergence. You can see, the list of this, look at this. The list is, we could talk about this for hours, right? Bat origin of human coronavirus. This was done in 2015. Okay, so I guess, it's by date. So the top is the most recent. But it's pretty clear that that the NIH is funding some research in China and around bats and coronaviruses. But the argument again is here. It does disqualify as gain of function. Are they looking at? I guess I could go in and look at specifically if they were looking at how the virus changes, loses functionality, or gains functionality. But it's I don't know how else you would classify this. Urbanization of zoonotic disease. Comparative analysis of rodent and small mammal viromes to better serve. So let's just take a look at a random serologic. Let's try and find one that we would think would be gain of function here. Human-animal interactions. Okay, so coronavirus spillover would be pretty close to what we're looking for. Because for spillover to occur, of course, the virus would have to change some sort usually has to be some sort of change in the function of the virus for it to spill over from animals to humans. Human interaction with animals has been included about virus. And what I've been doing is searching for gain. I've been searching for gain of function in any of these, and I think that's where the contention is like you can't. So I searched gain here, and you don't see gain anywhere in this paper. But does that disqualify it? I don't know that you could say that either. Serologic testing, so they're testing serum. It means blood or part of the blood. Plates. These papers are just so scientifically dense. Sample of 400 of snowball sampling. Participants. Let's go to the. Okay, so they're studying humans. We use novel homogeneous rates of person serologic and behavior data. Yeah, so I mean, it's like this study is not directly, would not be directly gain of function. But did the NIH provide funding for, some of, something that could border it? Yeah, I mean, let's see if we can look at another. Let's see if we can dive into another one of these. So viral traits would be like the functions of of a virus. Viral main. This is titled main. That's interesting. Okay, I guess the main body. Here's a nice diagram. It's a GAM zoonotic. Yeah, that bad virus richness. Yikes. Observe viral richness. Recent that show that zoonotic emerged events human hazardous species rich correlate with mammal bird diversity. So this one is looking at again, like the viruses that are found in animals and then how they transmit to humans, global distribution, missing zoonoses. I mean, you can really just spend hours like digging into this stuff, right? No statistical methods. That's brilliant. You'd love to see no statistics database. GAM fitting. What is a GAM? Generalized additive models. Yeah, the one thing I really like about research papers are they just like make up, you make up acronyms. You just make up acronyms and then you have to define them. Which, of course, it's better than spelling out the whole, each word, every word each time. Cross validation, spatial variables. Calculating, visualizing missing viruses and missing zoonoses. Image data availability. So, fruit bats. Yeah, I mean, I think, in the case of Dr. Fauci and what Dr. Fauci is talking about, he is looking at it from a perspective of are any of these papers looking directly at improving or changing a virus to ensure that it is more effective or can infect humans? And I believe that's the big question here. And I mean, the research is along those lines, but I don't know that it directly, that it's direct. Any of these papers look like they're direct. If you search, again, if you search gain of function, there's no, there's no function at all on these papers. The dormant flaviviruses. Cross neutralization. 2017. I mean, it's just you're circumventing the term, because a lot of these papers look at genes, coding regions, proteins, which all have to do with how the the virus infects humans. They're looking at ACE here, which is angiotensin converting enzyme. So it affects angiotensin affects your blood vessels, and how of course angio meaning blood vessel, and tensin meaning pressor, or you can think of tension. You could say tension or pressure. This is an enzyme that converts, I think it's angiotensin 1 into 2, or tensin, renin into angiotensin, which, it just affects your of course, your blood pressure. So there's ACE inhibitors that we give for treatment of hypertension. So that's one of the binding sites. So it's like these papers that were funded by the NIH do revolve around like the functionality of SARS-CoV and SARS-like coronaviruses. But could you directly say that it is gain of function? Well, no, it doesn't. None of these papers have those words in it. So I've searched quite a number of them now. But boy, I mean, it teeters on it. You're teetering on the fence here. In conclusion, it looks like we're just teetering on the fence. Boy. Anyway, let me know. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you watching. This was a very interesting video for me to do. Let me know what you think, and if you were able to find anything else about this. But it does look like that Dr. Fauci is correct.
You're doing on a day-by-day basis. Right now, the risk is still low.
It was just bad. It is bad now. I think these numbers are so stunning.
If you're a healthy young person, that there is no reason, if you want to go on a cruise ship, to go on a cruise ship. It is not a good idea to travel, period, in the United States. People should not be walking around with masks.
Well, if one mask is good, it makes common sense that maybe 2 masks are better.
If you look at the evolution of the virus in bats and what's out there now, it's very, very strongly leaning towards this could not have been artificially or deliberately manipulated.
Are you still confident that it developed naturally?
No, I'm not convinced about that. I think that we should continue to investigate what went on in China.
Finally, I just wanted to say that I think Dr. Fauci's comments were taken out of context. It really depends on when he had said these certain things. I understand the public and in general, you could become really confused on what you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, to reduce spread of any infectious disease that spread as quickly as SARS-CoV-2 did, you should do that which is the most simple, right? What is the easiest thing that you can do? I mean, it's almost easier than washing your hands, right? Is put on that face covering. The fact that this was ever disputed, or that sometimes he said to not wear a mask, it's kind of ridiculous. But again, I don't really want to go into all of the little clips and figure out exactly what he said and in what context it was. But he should have just stuck with wear it all the time. Because in some of those instances, he was talking about being outside, or whether or not you're in a bar, or like if you're going to eat. I think most people just do their best, and the best thing for you to do is to wear it whenever you're around strangers, people you don't know, if you're going to the grocery store, and then sanitize your hands. I mean, it's more simple than getting a shot. That's where I'll leave it. I really don't know what else to say. So, if you look at different modes of transmission, this is kind of what I was talking about before. So, you have contact transmission, where the organism is directly transferred from one infected person to another. Now, this usually means through blood or mites or something that goes in your hands. Now the thing is how many, going back to what I was saying before, how many people are you touching on a regular basis? For me, I mean, it's never really been that high. But if you go down to droplet, you can see here that the droplet route is respiratory. The infection is transmitted when the virus or bacteria travels into the respiratory tract and through the mucosal surfaces. So that just means like through your mouth, your trachea, your tongue, or lungs. And airborne is very similar. Airborne droplet nuclei are particles that are very small, and you essentially breathe them in, and this can happen over a certain distance, and they stay in the air. So again, when this all happened, with the way that it was spreading, at how fast it was spreading, it was only ever these were the only two possibilities, either droplet or airborne transmission. And so for there ever to be, for Dr. Fauci to ever change his guidance and talk about not wearing masks is just, it's just kind of appalling. He should have stuck to it. He should have stuck to saying that everybody should wear masks unless you're at home and you're around people that you're always around.